Prop 139, which Arizonans overwhelmingly passed last year, made it clear that abortion restrictions in the state have to have a basis in medicine in order to protect people's health. I'm told there are laws on the book right now that restrict abortions that have a basis rooted in potentially swaying decisions or a basis in making it harder to get an abortion. And for those reasons, attorneys say those laws are now unconstitutional.
There is a wide range of abortion restrictions that are still on the books in Arizona.
Healthcare providers are suing the state over lingering abortion restrictions. This after Arizonans overwhelmingly voted to enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution last November. The Arizona Abortion Access Act created the fundamental right to abortion care up until fetal viability, with exceptions to save the life of the mother.
Unfortunately, a ballot initiative and new constitutional amendment isn't a silver bullet.
Although the amendment passed with about 62% support, advocates say there is still more work to be done.
So the new amendment under the Arizona Constitution makes it crystal clear that any abortion restrictions have to have a basis in medicine. They have to protect people's health, and they cannot interfere with people's decisional autonomy.
Doctors and activists, as well as the Arizona Medical Association, want to eliminate several conflicting laws, including a law that requires informed consent in person 24 hours before the abortion, a law that prohibits abortion medications like mifepristone from being delivered by mail, and a law that prohibits abortions sought based on genetic abnormalities.
Now, the laws that we challenged, none of them have a basis in medicine. None of them make abortion safer. The only purpose of these laws is to make it more difficult for people to access abortion care and to shame people and try to make them change their mind.
Attorney Gail Deedy with the Center for Reproductive Rights says the recently passed amendment to the state constitution should make any conflicting restrictions unconstitutional. Of course, now that's up to a judge to decide.
The lawsuit that we filed yesterday is aimed at challenging what we believe to be the most harmful and restrictive laws that are currently on the books in Arizona. That doesn't mean that it's all of the restrictions. There's still a ways to go.
Now, I did reach out to the Center for Arizona Policy, which is a conservative group against abortion, to get a comment on this lawsuit. I have not yet heard back. We'll be sure to give updates on this case both on air and online. In the newsroom, I'm Sarah Robinson for Arizona's Family.
Sarah, thank you.